The thing that I loved about MASH is that it could be very funny and very serious at the same time.
It was such a little miracle happening every week.
We were people who actually had a mutual respect and a love for the material and what we were doing.
In a way, MASH was a metaphor for all of our lives.
The writers, the director, and the cast had such great concern for the value of the property that they were doing.
We were telling stories about people who really lived.
A little hospital where the goal is to save lives. In a hospital, in the middle of a war where the goal is to destroy life. The format is just powerful, overwhelming, touching, funny, whatever.
My memories of the finale, it became a national phenomenon that the entire world stopped to watch this episode of television, that the cast was on the cover of every magazine.
So this translated into, I think it was 106 million people. That was something that we're all very proud of and an astonishing. It was never ever to be beaten except by the Super Bowl.
And nobody really knows how big that audience was because there were people watching in town halls, hundreds of people in front of one set.
And also in New York that the theaters, movie theaters and live theater, the attendance was way down that night. The only thing that seemed to make money were places that offered pizza to go.
Well, my main memory of the finale was driving to this Moroccan restaurant, a favorite of Alan's in Westwood, and seeing the streets totally empty. There was nobody on the road when that show was on the air.
In New York City, the Department of Water and Power said the water level at the end of the show reached an incredible low point because people were flushing the toilet all at the same time after the show was over.
I like to think that we don't really know how big the audience was, but it was pretty big. It was about half the country watching at one time.
In the 10th season, Alan and I were doing a scene, and I said, "How long do you expect this to go on?" And he said, "I'd always thought about 10 years.
Once we knew that the wheels were in motion to end the show, then we knew we were going to do this 2-hour show.
The one thing we want is an episode that ends the war." And so we had this long talk, and some disagreed and some agreed, and finally we all came to an agreement, and we let it be known to the studio and to the network that we wanted to bring MASH to an end, and we wanted an episode to end the war.
So the hard part about Goodbye, Farewell, and Amen was to come up with the basic idea, and the basic idea was the end of the war.
It probably didn't have quite the comedy quotient as many of the half hours. It was more of a dramatic story, but at the same time, we didn't want to be frivolous about the final show.
Goodbye, Farewell, and Amen was reading through it was tough, poignant.
The Korean War was only about 3-4 years, and here we had been at it for 11, or going to be 11. So when we went into that last season, we all felt like we were getting, my hair was turning gray, actually.
We based our stories so much on what their real lives were like that sometimes we wrote a story that we thought we were making up. And when Larry and Jean went to Korea, they found out that that story had actually been lived by real people.
And early on in that tour of Korea, somebody had told me about an incident whereby a group of South Koreans were trying to hide at night under a bridge because walking over them was a North Korean patrol. And one of the Korean women had an infant baby, and the baby was crying. And in order to save maybe 50 people, the mother smothered the baby.
And it's not so much just that story, which is terrible enough, and which, of course, we used in the last episode. It's that for the rest of that visit, everybody Bert met, he would say, "Oh, I heard this awful story a couple of days ago." And he would tell them the story, and their reaction would be, "Yeah?" Because they all knew somebody that it happened to.
That story, or a story just like it, I've heard from at least 2 wars. And now I think I just read about it the other day in a current war. Trying to silence a baby, and the baby dying as a result. This heartbreaking event that you don't expect to happen in war. In war, you expect people to die from bombs, from bullets, shrapnel, mines. You don't expect them to die from a mother trying to keep the baby quiet, not in any way wanting to hurt the baby, but it's real collateral damage and unexpected.
But it's the beginning of the show where Hawkeye has had a psychiatric breakdown and is in a hospital and is undergoing intense therapy from psychiatrist Sidney Friedman. And as they dig deeper and deeper into what's going on and what is he suffering from, what brought this on, he tells the story about being on a bus, and he remembers at the back of the bus that a woman was smothering a chicken. He was choking a chicken. She was choking a chicken because it was making. And finally, it comes out, of course, that it wasn't a chicken at all. It was a baby.
So we took seriously the lives of these people. We didn't just use them for comic effect or for dramatic effect. We wanted to be. I think we really wanted to respect them and be true to what they had lived through, and that gave us something that you can't make up. It's something that makes everybody involved in it, acting it, writing it, talking about it, have something human to relate to. And that's why we watch stories, I think, is to warm up to one another.
These people were saving lives, and the fact that war is about killing people, and they were about trying to save people. So the insanity of behavior, if you will, you can do anything. As I said, you can make the most outrageous thing you want to say. If I'm saving a life, that's acceptable.
May I tell you the greatest compliment I ever heard for the show? I'm in a parking lot going into a restaurant in Wisconsin. I was doing a theater engagement there, and I was going out to dinner, and a man approached me in the parking lot. He said, "Mr. Berghoff, may I speak to you for a moment?" I said, "Sure." He said, "I was in the trenches in Korea, and I knew enough about the trenches in Korea to know immediately that this was a man who had been through serious trauma, because that was a living hell." And he said, "When I came back home in 1952, I was changed. And my wife knew that I needed to talk about it. And I couldn't bring myself to talk about it." And he said, "When your show came on the air many years later, it was the first time that I could reach over and touch her on the arm and say, 'See, honey, that's the way it was.'" That was the greatest compliment that we could ever have, because we always tried to tie the entertainment value into the reality as much as we possibly could in our small way.
I remember a guy from the studio, an executive, coming down, and he sat down with us and he said, "I want you to understand something. We can't do an episode that ends the war." We said, "Why not?" And he said, "Do you remember The Fugitive?" We said, "Yes, we remember The Fugitive." He said, "Well, in The Fugitive, at the end of the show, David Jansen decided he wanted to find the one-armed man who was actually the perpetrator of the murder, and he was declared himself, doctor, whatever he was, murder." Well, they did that, they put it on the air, and it killed the show in syndication. So we sat and looked at him for a minute, and I finally said, it may surprise you to know that most of the people in the country understand that the Korean War came to an end. He sort of looked at us and then got up and walked out of the room.
MASH to me is the great existential comedy / paradox. You have these men who are forced against their will to go to a war zone to try to save lives in an arena where the objective is to kill people.
I remember Bert reading several times a quote that went into the show, which a nurse, when they reached the peace agreement, where the boundaries would be drawn, I think it was to go into effect 12 hours later, and the boundaries were to be set wherever they were 12 hours later. So the fighting continued, trying to go a couple more inches here and a couple more inches there. And in a MASH unit, the press were saying to a nurse, "How do you feel about peace?" And she pointed to the triage and said, and this is a quote that Bert read to us several times as we were getting ready for the ending, the nurse said, "Does this look like peace to you?" We gave that line to Hot Lips in the finale.
It was like severing something that you wanted it to end because you know it had to end, but at the same time, it was something that you didn't want secretly to end. You wish you could go on forever because it was your life. It was part of your everyday existence.
We went through this thing knowing, this is the last time I'll ever stand here. This is the last opportunity I'm going to have. We get to say goodbye to these characters. At one point, Bert, who was directing, said, "I've never had to tell actors to not cry so much in my life. Stop crying. you are, you're letting the audience. You let the audience have the experience. Don't have the experience yourselves." So we sucked it up and managed to get through it.
And everybody was having a difficult time with that, and the emotions were very raw.
It was there was a lot of crying, a lot of hugging, and a lot of crying, a lot of grown people running around. And I don't mean that actor baloney, like, "Oh, darling," and all that stuff. It was an actual. You were leaving your family. You were leaving your brothers and sisters, and
it's truly, to this day, a very memorable experience.
What we tried to do was to find dramatic or interesting and comedic ways that each of the characters would have an interesting story within that larger overall story. So it became, as many MASH episodes were, though this one had much more of that because it was longer, multiple pieces that we could weave together.
I thought it was brilliant because it showed in each and every case what the war cost the characters.
My hope was to tell a story that showed the war ending and the doctors and nurses going home, but to show that in some way everybody had been affected by the war, that they were all going home with some kind of a wound. Mulcahy was deafened.
I thought it was interesting having Father Mulcahy have that disability and be angry with God, that God had thrown him a curve, and it happens to a lot of people.
It cost David Ogden, Steyerko, Charles Emerson Winchester, his music.
In the final MASH episode, it was all about his conducting some musicians and how important that was to him that they get that right, and there was some tragedy involved with that, and eventually I think David actually was conducting orchestras.
Guy falls in love and he's going to find his wife's family, and so he's got to stay back there as much as this guy wanted to get out.
It was just, for me, it was the end all. It cost Hawkeye his sanity.
It's great storytelling, and how do you come about that? I just thought it was great.
The ending where Hawkeye takes off in the helicopter, and BJ, who was refused to say goodbye to him as he goes to his point of view, is because all the rocks have been that are part of the base there, the little white rocks that I had remembered from camp when I was a kid. They had the same thing, and to take the rocks and formulate the word goodbye. So that was goodbye from BJ to Hawkeye, but more importantly, it was goodbye, of course, from MASH to the world.
Harry and I, again, Margaret and Potter had their very serious, loving relationship, and I had to get through saying, "You dear sweet man, I'll never forget you," and I still can't do it because I never will. I mean, we were just so close.
It was sad. It was sad just walking into the room. So I remember being very sad, proud of what was on the screen, but saying goodbye to something I loved. I still miss that show.
Why?
You know, I came to Hollywood to be a prostitute, to prostitute my talent. And that show showed me that I could still do it for love. And I tried never to lose that again. To make sure I didn't work on something unless I had a reason I wanted to do it.
We were on a wait, whatever, the sun, whatever. And Al and I were talking, and we were looking around. Everybody's having a good time. We're shooting, and it's wonderful. It's a beautiful day. And he said, "Aren't we lucky to be us?"
When the lights go out, I'll be able to say, well, I did that. I screwed up a lot of other stuff, but I got that right, or I was able to be a part of that.
As it was happening, we knew how lucky we were, how blessed. Really, more blessing than luck. I think how really it was a gift to work consistently on this material and grow.
At every level, everyone wanted to do the best. I mean, that was the mandate. And so people were challenged to do their best, and they did. And so there was respect, and there was collegiality. It was fun to go to work.
I also really appreciate the fact that this is a show that has really stood the test of time. 83 was the last one, is that right? And people are still fans of MASH in a big way.
MASH was good. And so whatever the storyline might have been, the writing was good, the acting was good, the producing was good, the directing was good. Where can you go wrong? You're going to watch something and you know that's quality. So that's it. That's what it's all about. It's the brilliance and the legacy that was left by a bunch of people who actually loved what they were doing.
People ask me about typecasting and whether MASH could have, I would be bothered by that. And I always say, well, the blessings that MASH showered on me were so great that I think I'm a pretty lucky actor.
Well, obviously, MASH, we wouldn't be sitting here. I wouldn't be making a lot of movies. I wouldn't be doing a lot of stage plays, writing books. If it weren't for MASH, MASH connected me with a large audience. I'd still be happy doing whatever I was doing because all I ever wanted was to, and truly I thought of this in these terms from the time I was a young man. I just wanted to do material that I respected with actors I respected in front of an audience that got it. Now, the amazing thing was I never expected that to happen in the mass media. I expected that to happen in a little theater in Wisconsin or something. But it happened in front of, by the last episode, it happened in front of something like 105 million people.
Harry said that in an interview. How has MASH changed you? Has it made you a better actor? And he said, I don't know about that, but it's made me a better person.
I think I'm proud of all those people that made it possible. all the writers and the actors and the whole gang.
Thank you for watching METV Remembers the MASH finale.